welcome back to Life on the Franch. Um, Today we're going to be talking about free speech, which is going to be a topic that I'm going to do every Friday, free Speech Fridays. So, what's a speech code? For backstory. Speech codes are guidelines that universities use to, like, police or like limit uh, what students uh, can get in trouble for saying. So, for example, in Connecticut, uh, at one point their speech code said that included if a student laughed inappropriately, they could be subjected to some form of pushback from the university because that was not seen as protected speech. So that would be a very extreme case of speech codes. But most of them are less restrictive than that by far. And they tend to include things like hate speech. It really varies. Like, an important part of speech codes is that universities and states all have different ones. So it's uh, it's very hard to study because you can't look at all of them at once. But in 2012, one researcher took it upon themselves to try to do this. And what they found was that out of 700 universities, approximately, 2/3 had speech codes. And we're going to circle back to that in a moment, but just bear that in mind, okay? So, speech codes started in 1988. And they started at the University of Michigan after a poster that was horrifically racist against black people was put all over campus. Like everywhere. It was like very awful. So the university felt like they needed to do something about this. Okay, so what can a university do to make this better or not happen again? Enter the speech code. So after this, they instituted a speech code that would ban many things, but basically made it so that you cannot say racist things on campus. And the first speech code was born. I think that looking back, there were probably better ways to handle this situation than jumping straight to curtailing free speech rights of college students. Even like awful things like this. Like, I'm not agreeing with the poster's material at all. But perhaps like having some form of event where students could talk about how they felt about the posters, or trying to do a restorative justice program. I'm not saying any of those like necessarily would work, but the reason I'm suggesting they should have tried other things, in addition to curtailing speech rights, starting the curtailing of speech rights for college students for years to come, it also hurt the people it was meant to help. So within the first 18 months of the University of Michigan's speech code adoption, 20 black students were penalized by that speech code. That's crazy. But it's not surprising because usually the people with the least amount of power on campus and in life tend to be the most punished. It's no different with speech codes. And we saw that at the very first one at the University of Michigan. But again, 2012, 2/3. Just saying. Just saying. By 1992, at least 300 universities had adopted speech codes. And then we have this 2/3 number coming from out of 700. So, like, it's grown. And that's just a sample of universities. That is not all universities. So, just saying. And I also don't know how representative the study was. But critically, as I mentioned, this definitely raises some First Amendment concerns. So students have challenged speech codes. And every time that a student has challenged a university's speech code, either the federal court or the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled in favor of the student and said the speech code was unconstitutional. These cases did not start like yesterday or after 2012. These started pretty much as soon as speech codes started. So universities have chosen to basically ignore the fact that the federal district courts and the U.S. Supreme Court find these to be unconstitutional violations of students' free speech rights. Why, might you ask? Well, probably it has something to do with other things that colleges are trying to accomplish. For example, in this book, Free Speech on Campus by Sigal and Porath, she kind of works through, she's the chair, or when she wrote this book was the chair, of the division on basically free speech on campus at the University of Pennsylvania. And she's also a professor there in education and political science. So this book is about trying to find a balance between ensuring the safety of all students while still protecting speech rights. And by safety, that's like physical safety, and to a degree, like emotional safety. But this is kind of the argument. So the posters obviously made people upset. So does that mean that they are not protected speech? And particularly at public universities, which represent the state, just as public schools are representative of the state, they have to follow free speech laws. At private schools, you have way less, obligation to care about student speech rights. It's a very good example of the transition that free speech rights protectors, or free speech rights as um, an idea, uh, like where they're floating, right? Are they Democrat like supported? Are they conservative supported? Um, Trump, in his first campaign, uh, kind of heavily supported speech rights sometimes. He supported speech rights to say offensive things. He said whatever he wanted to say, and many of them were offensive. So it signaled that he would be supportive of free speech because he is using speech that some could label hate speech occasionally. So if he says it, obviously he believes you should be able to say it. So it started becoming more protected and picked up by Republicans. This also is like coming from the result of a reaction to the PC movement, um, like like snowflakes and whatnot. So like Republicans are saying that, you know, words, if like words bother you, then you're a snowflake because you're too sensitive, and you just think you're so special, whatever, like special snowflake. And PC is just like, you won't let me, say what I want to say. I should be able to say what I want to say, even if it's horrifically offensive. Um, and Democrats have moved from being very vocal supporters of free speech to less support, uh, less support for free speech, and it's about the political correctness idea, um, and the microaggression idea. Now, nobody right now is trying to like ban microaggressions on the large scale, but speech codes could. Um, Not constitutionally, but they don't seem to care about that anyway. Um, but this push to like not say offensive things, like because they're offensive and they don't add value to a conversation. Any idea that you can get across that's worth hearing, you can do without like using hate speech, for example, like slurs. Um, so, for example, I'm a bisexual person that could be used at me or around me. Um, and so that would be a word that would be considered likely, if it's targeted at me, especially hate speech in the eyes of people who are very supportive of the political correctness movement. Because it would hurt like my feelings, but personally, I think they have a right to do it. They, to an extent, not at me repeatedly because that's harassment, which is already illegal. No need to curtail their speech rights. If they say it in like usually there's the poster and it says like God, like that's a political statement, and it's not targeting any specific person. Um, it it's hate speech, but I think it's political and protected free speech. Um, but liberals are questioning that. Like, do we want that in the world? Like we want our world to be inclusive and diverse and multicultural, and there's no place for hate in this world. And well, I agree. A more inclusive, more diverse, more multicultural world would be great. Um, I don't think that curtailing free speech is going to lead to that. There are very few people who defend free speech in on issues that they don't believe in, because it's gotten to the point now on college campuses, in my personal experience at least, that if you defend somebody's right to say something offensive, you must believe in that. Because why would you defend this person's right to say it if you didn't believe in the offensive statement? And that's just a bad sense of logic, but that's what it is. So many people who are supporters of free speech, ironically, are silent on this issue because they don't want to be associated with, being racist or homophobic. Um, like if I defended somebody that said something against, like gay people, for example, I am a bisexual person, right? But you don't know that by looking at someone. So it offends me personally, right? But if I stand up for this guy's right to say it to somebody else, like somebody else is like, you can't say that, and tries to get the university to use their speech codes, coming back, use their speech codes to punish this student, I would defend this student. And the student who wants the speech code enforced is going to think that I agree with this guy, even though I don't. And for full disclosure, I am pretty far left. In my, I use my right hand again. I don't know. I talk with my right hand. I'm pretty far left in my political leanings, but at the same time, free speech is very important to the success of a democracy and its survival. So, yeah, I often come off to people as conservative because, like on campus, because I stand up for conservatives on campus, even the ones I really disagree with. And that's something that needs to change. So I would ask that if you believe in free speech rights, that you consider starting to stand up for them and starting to change the narrative on college campuses or wherever you are, your workplace, your school, your high school, because you cannot have discussions about race that this country desperately needs to have without someone saying something offensive. Maybe even just blatantly racist, horrific statement. But the conversation still needs to happen. And by silencing people on, even if it's just a few people on this side, this whole side now is not going to listen to you because you've silenced people who are on their side. So that pretty much wraps up the Free Speech Friday for this week. I'll be back next week. If you're interested in learning more about campus speech, like college speech in general, I would recommend, again, Free Speech on Campus by Sigal Ben Porath, and this is kind of from an administrative perspective. How is the school trying to balance uh, these issues? So this would give you an insight as to how schools, like universities, are trying to navigate appeasing students, or even they agree with the students, and free speech, and like campus rallies and protests. Another book that covers this topic, it's not the whole book, but it does cover this topic, is Campus Politics by Johnathan Zimmerman. Even if you don't know anything about free speech, this is a book that is very easy to read. It's not written in any sort of like academic way. It's meant to be easily accessible for the masses. So I hope you enjoyed my first Free Speech Friday. If you have any suggestions for either topics for me to cover or ways that I can change this up, like so that it's more clear, leave them down below. Or if you have questions about anything, and again, I'll link all of my sources in the description. And yeah, if you like this video and you want to see more videos like it, they will be coming on Fridays, so click subscribe and ding the bell button. Anyhow, most importantly, I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye!